Today is Monday, April 30th, 2018. It's Monday, 30th, 2018. How's everybody doing? Hey, welcome to the African History Network show. This is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. So we did our show last night, Sunday, April 29th on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation. And there were some topics I did not get to, so I came on and did another 2 hours on Blog Talk Radio and on Facebook as well, our Facebook fan page, the African History Network. And one of the things I talked about was the opening of the Lynching Memorial Museum in Alabama. Took place Thursday, April 26th. Okay, and you've heard me talk some about the Memorial Museum and the Equal Justice Initiative, and the executive director, Brian Stevenson. Okay, and there were some articles that I shared dealing with this, and the Facebook Live broadcast that I did after the show got cut off after about an hour. So we're going to deal more in depth with those topics. Okay, so what I want to talk about here is how lynchings were used by white America to destroy Black economic competition. How lynchings were used by white America to destroy Black economic competition. And this is one of the things that the Legacy Museum from Enslavement to Mass Incarceration and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice in Montgomery, Alabama, that were opened up Thursday, April 26th. These are some of the things that they commemorate. Okay, so if we and how's everybody doing? Those watching on Facebook, share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. Okay, and then we're broadcasting on Blog Talk Radio also, blogtalkradio.com / the African History Network show. We're broadcasting on Blog Talk Radio as well. You can call in and listen by phone, 914-338-1375. 914-338-1375 is the call-in number. Also, if you want to listen there as well, okay? 914-338-1375. Okay. All right, and we'll post that there. Okay, so when we look at some of the information here dealing with the museum, okay, then I want to talk about the Elaine race riot of 1919. All right, so the Equal Justice Initiative gave media representatives tours of the National Memorial for Peace and Justice and the Legacy Museum. The memorial opened up April 26th. All right. This memorial documents 4,400 lynchings of African Americans by white Americans from 1877 to 1950. Okay. All except 300 of them occurred in the South. All except 300 of them occurred in the South. Okay. And at the memorial, they have 800 6-foot steel monuments, and each one of these monuments represent a county where the Equal Justice Initiative documented at least one lynching. Okay, when we look at some of the reasons why the lynchings took place, you have one example, a 14-year-old African American boy named Warren Powell. He was lynched in East Point, Georgia in 1889 for frightening a white girl. Okay, lynched in 1889 for frightening a white girl. He was 14 years old. You have William Miller. William Miller was lynched in Brighton in 1908 for organizing local coal miners. Okay, because racial terror was used against African Americans who were trying to organize for economic empowerment, organize unions oftentimes, or just for all types of innocuous things as well. This was real terror inflicted upon African Americans. You have the case of Calvin Kimbler, Kimbler'n. He was lynched by a mob of at least 3,000 white people in Pueblo, Colorado in 1900. Now, Brian Stevenson, who's the executive director of the Equal Justice Initiative, and he's an attorney also, a couple of 2 or 3 weeks ago on 60 Minutes, Oprah Winfrey interviewed him regarding the opening of the museum and the memorial. So a lot of people saw this and went viral. Some people were asking, well, why are they showing this, right? There's a reason why they're showing this, because it's history that America has not reckoned with yet. So Brian Stevenson said it could be the most minor social transgression. It could be the most minor social transgression. Knocking on the front door of a white woman, not calling a police officer Mr., walking behind your employer's wife, asking for higher wages as a sharecropper, asking for higher wages as a sharecropper. Okay, this is history, and we see that because of the Memphis, Tennessee, the Moss Store murders in Memphis, Tennessee in 1892. We see that Ida B. Wells gets involved in the anti-lynching movement as well, and then we know in 1909. She becomes a co-founder of the NAACP, and one of the things that the NAACP was fighting against were rampant lynchings of African Americans. Okay, all right, so everybody tuning in, how's everybody doing? Hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network. Those on Facebook, share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. We're dealing with how lynchings were used by white America to destroy Black economic competition. Okay, and we know that the Legacy Museum from Enslavement to Mass Incarceration and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, they both opened in Montgomery, Alabama last Thursday, April 26th, to commemorate these lynchings, 4,400 lynchings of African Americans, tell their stories, etc. Okay. Check out the article from al.com, alabama.com. Memorial Museum recount terror of lynching, slavery's legacies. Memorial Museum recount terror of lynching, slavery's legacies. Now, what's interesting about Alabama is that in Alabama, they don't celebrate Dr. King Day. They celebrate Dr. King Day. They celebrate Dr. King and Jefferson Davis Day. Okay, I think it's Jefferson Davis, Dr. King and Jefferson Davis Day, president of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis. And we know that Alabama was one of those Confederate states, one of those states that succeeded from the Union. Okay, one of those Confederate states. All right, let me find this other article I was looking for. Okay, so, and then also last Monday, April 23rd, in Alabama was Confederate Memorial Day as well. So this memorial to those who were lynched is in Alabama, and Alabama still celebrates Confederate Memorial Day, honoring the Confederacy, honoring those who took up arms against the Union to preserve slavery. They took up arms against the Union to preserve slavery, okay, and fought against the Union. Okay, imagine that. And then also Mississippi on Monday, April 23rd, last week, they celebrate a Confederate Memorial Day as well. Okay, so there was an article from LA Times, Los Angeles Times, April 28th, 2018, just a couple of days ago. And this talks about how lynching was used by whites to destroy competition for Black businesses. And it deals with two letters that readers sent to the editors of the Los Angeles Times. The first one is by LeGrand H. Clegg II, LeGrand H. Clegg II. And this one's, and we know LeGrand Clegg had a series years ago. It was a video series called When the Black Man Ruled the World. Okay. It was a historical series. And he said, many sincere white Americans have raised the question of why African Americans have failed to become as successful as other people. Why African Americans have failed to become as successful as other people of color, especially recent immigrants to the United States. The article on lynchings shed some light on the subject. Okay, so there was an article dealing with the opening of the museum that was written by the Associated Press that talked about this history. Okay, that's what he was referring to. And a lot of the news outlets had this article. AtlantaBlackStar.com had it as well. Okay. So the story of the murder of Elmore Bowling, Bollin, He was a successful African-American businessman. He was killed by his jealous white neighbor in Alabama in 1949. Okay. In 1949, actually it's 1947. He said 49, it's actually 1947. And this was just a glimpse into a pattern of racist violence that terrorized African Americans for generations. On a broader scale, during the Jim Crow era, white Americans destroyed prosperous Black businesses in many communities. One of the most notorious of such incidents took place in Memphis, Tennessee in 1892. This is when you had a store called People's Grocery, okay? And I think the owner was Tom Moss, because this is also known as the Moss Store Murders, MOSS. And it was owned by a successful African-American businessman. And he competed with a nearby white-owned store. The People's Grocery owner and two of his African-American employees were lynched by white marauders in a horrific assault that reverberated throughout the nation and wiped out the entrepreneurial spirit of many African Americans in Memphis and elsewhere. Okay, now we still persisted. It's important for us to understand that we still persisted in spite of the lynchings. Okay, you have another editor's letter by readers sent to the editor. This one is by Karl Martz, M-A-R-T-Z, from Redlands. In this short letter, he said, I hope the memorial to lynching victims in Alabama pays homage in some way to the first journalist, a Black woman, to put an international spotlight on lynching in the South. Ida B. Wells not only documented the extent of lynching, but even more importantly, debunked the quote-unquote rape myth, This was the prevailing view at the turn of the 20th century, that lynching of Black men was somehow justified because they raped white women. This was the rape myth, okay? The prevailing view at the turn of the 20th century was that the lynching of Black men was somehow justified because they raped white women. See, this is what, when you have Dr. W.B. Du Bois, when you have Ida B. Wells, when you have people like William Monroe Trotter, when they, you have the Niagara movement founded in 1905, but then when they're co-founders of the NAACP in 1909, they are largely fighting against the lynchings and fighting for a federal anti-lynching law, okay? They never got a federal anti-lynching law, but they were drawing attention to these lynchings and they were fighting against these things, okay? Now, using statistics from white newspapers, Ida B. Wells revealed that lynchings in the South had many causes, including the rising economic competition of African Americans against whites or with whites. Maintaining white supremacy, not the rape of white women, was the overall motivating factor, Ida B. Wells concluded. Maintaining white supremacy, not the rape of white women, was the overall motivating factor, Ida B. Wells concluded. Ida B. Wells later became an urban reformer and passionate suffragist. She's fighting for the right for women to vote, and African-American women to vote. But her groundbreaking work was soon largely forgotten after she died in 1931. I hope she is not forgotten today. So that was a letter to the editor that a reader named Karl Marx wrote to the LA Times. So check out this article from the LA Times, how lynching was used by whites to destroy competition for black business owners. Okay. I've talked about the Moss Store murders before. We've posted articles about that here before as well. A lot of people don't know about it. Blackden.com has a good article about it. We post articles on our fan page, the African History Network, from blackden.com as well. How's everybody doing tonight? You know, I'm so excited about doing this. I got to do my opening, okay, for the African History Network show, okay? All right. So at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his actions, because his mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the show. We deal with current events in history and politics, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T. Text the word Kemet, K-E-M-E-T. The 22828 to sign up for our email newsletter. We send it out a few times a week. A lot of information, let you know when we're going live with the radio shows, send out articles, etc. You can call in. You can listen by phone, 914-338-1375, because we're broadcasting through Blog Talk Radio as well, 914-338-1375. And if you have a question or comment, you can call in at that number as well. We also posted a link where you can listen on Blog Talk Radio also. So if you can't listen on Facebook, you can listen on Blog Talk Radio. Those on Blog Talk Radio listening, go to our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network on Facebook, and you can watch us there as well. All right. Okay, so when we look at the Moss Store murders, right, the tragedy that inspired Ida B. Wells' anti-lynching crusade. So in March of 1892, Ida B. Wells, who was a journalist, among other things, she was a school teacher, she was a journalist, she was a newspaper publisher as well, newspaper owner. This was a bad system. I call her one of the original ride or die chicks, because at one point she was carrying a gun as well. So she was a journalist and former Memphis school teacher. She started a crusade against lynching after 3 friends of hers were brutally murdered by a Memphis mob. Tom Moss, and 2 of his friends, Calvin McDowell and Henry Stewart, were arrested for defending themselves against an attack on Tom Moss's store. Now, Tom Moss was a highly respected figure in the African-American community. He was a postman as well as the owner of a grocery store. Okay, this was the People's Grocery Store that Brother LeGrand Clegg II talked about, right? Now, a white competitor was enraged that Tom Moss had drawn away his black customers. So this white competitor hired some off-duty deputy sheriffs to destroy Tom Moss's store. So let's look at this. So African Americans come out of slavery. Now, this is 1892. Okay, slavery ends in 1865. This is not even a full 30 years after slavery ends and the 13th Amendment. Okay, and you're going to have some of us, not all of us, but you're going to have some of us who have thriving stores. We acquire land and things like this. And you have some whites who are jealous of this success of African Americans, and they're going to sabotage their business. They're going to attack their business, try to destroy it, terrorize African Americans with lynchings. Now, this is less than 20 years after the end of Reconstruction, 1877. End of Reconstruction. This is in Tennessee. This is in the South. The Union troops are taken out of the South And they were there to some extent protecting the rights of the former enslaved Africans. Okay, this is the Compromise of 1877. This is how Rutherford B. Hayes, the Republican, became president. The Compromise of 1877. Look that up, because this is going to reverse a lot of the gains that African Americans made during Reconstruction from 1865 to 1877. 1892 is 4 years before Plessy versus Ferguson, U.S. Supreme Court case which cements the Jim Crow laws. And you're going to have racial terror inflicted upon African Americans to enforce the Jim Crow laws. So a white competitor was enraged that Tom Moss had drawn away his black customers, so he hired some off-duty sheriff deputies to destroy the store. Tom Moss and his friends, not knowing that the men were sheriff deputies, resisted. A gun battle broke out and several deputies were wounded because these brothers were armed. They're protecting themselves. And they shot back. They fired back. So Tom Moss, his two friends, and 100 other African-American supporters were arrested. Tom Moss, his two friends, and 100 other African-American supporters were arrested. This is 1892. Several nights later, masked vigilantes dragged Tom Moss and his two friends from their cells, took them to a deserted railroad yard, and shot them to death. Okay, now this is a lynching. A lynching does not just mean being hung. A lynching of these unjust racial killings. Okay, so this was a lynching as well, just like Emmett Till was a lynching. Okay, August 28, 1955, Emmett Till in Money, Mississippi. Okay, so enraged by their deaths, Ida B. Wells lashed out at the refusal of Memphis police officers to arrest the well-known killers. She encouraged African Americans to protest with boycotts of white-owned stores and public transportation. Listen to this. They were talking about redistributing the pain through targeted, sustained economic withdrawal strategies. Ida B. Wells encouraged African Americans behind these unjust killings of these brothers. She encouraged them to protest with boycotts of white-owned businesses. Today, she'd probably tell you don't go to Starbucks or the Waffle House, as well as boycott public transportation, she told them. Now, these lynchings were a turning point in Ida B. Wells' life. She began to investigate and reveal the real motivations that lay behind lynching, Like many middle-class African Americans, Ida B. Wells had accepted the myth that only poor blacks were lynched for heinous crimes. Now, Ida B. Wells was now shocked into recognizing that even innocent middle-class African Americans could be targets. As Ida B. Wells investigated the reasons for lynching, she discovered that a number of the victims were lynched not for rape, but for having sexual relations with consenting white women. Having sexual relations. So what she found out was that a lot of cases that the white newspaper said were rape, or that white people in the community said were rape, come to find out these were consensual sexual relationships between willing white women and African American men. And the woman's husband found out, brother found out, cousin found out, father found out, and they go kill this African American man. So she said that, quote, nobody in this section of the community believes that old threadbare lie that Negro men raped white women. If Southern men are not careful, a conclusion might be reached which will be very damaging to the moral reputation of their women, end quote. So the suggestion that white women would willingly have sexual relationships with African American men enraged white people in Memphis, Tennessee. Since Ida B. Wells did not sign her name to her editorials, the white press assumed a man had written the article. So the Memphis Scimitar, S-C-I-M-I-T-A-R, the Memphis Scimitar, which was a white-owned newspaper, advocated a violent response. And they printed, quote, it will be the duty of those whom he has attacked to tie the wretch to a stake, brand him in the forehead with a hot iron, and perform upon him a surgical operation with a pair of shears, end quote. A mob destroyed Ida B. Wells' newspaper, her newspaper office, while Ida B. Wells was out of town. Forced to remain in the North, Ida B. Wells launched a national crusade against lynching that would capture the attention of the nation and Europe. So Ida B. Wells was ran out of Memphis, Tennessee because of this. Okay? Destroyed her newspaper office. Okay? So this is the Moss Store murders of 1892 in Memphis, Tennessee. BlackDen.com has an article about this. Also, I think blackpast.org has an article as well. We'll post this here on the thread of the broadcast. All right. How's everybody doing? Okay. So a broadcast. Shout out to everybody listening to us on Blog Talk Radio. You can call in, listen by phone, 914-338-1375. 914-338-1375. Shout out to everybody watching us on Facebook and Crowdcast. Okay. So if you like this type of information, also two quick things, then I'm going to continue. Three quick things. Number one, in the Detroit area, I'm doing a presentation this Sunday, May 6th, Nandy's Knowledge Cafe, Highland Park, Michigan, 71 Oakman Avenue, a Black Panther analysis, African culture, history, and Afrofuturism. Sunday, May 6th, 2018, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Free event, donations accepted. It's a huge presentation I have dealing with the film Black Panther. Visit AfricanHistoryNetwork.com for more information. Also, if you like this type of information that we share with you, be sure to register for the online classes that I teach. They're all on demand. We have about a 10-course bundle pack right now. It's on sale $60. It includes ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. That is a 14-hour, 7-session online course, and there's about 20 hours of bonus content. Also, you get Great African Women in History, the Mothers of Civilization, a class I did dealing with the film Black Panther, and some other presentations as well. Okay. So that's on sale $60 right now. And it's also at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We just posted the link. Okay, so there's an article from AtlantaBlackStar.com written by the Associated Press. This was from April 25th, 2018, called "We Don't Confront the Legacy of Lynching. New Memorial Offers Chance to Remember, Heal." We don't confront the legacy of lynching. New Memorial offers chance to remember, heal. Okay. And here on the thread on Facebook, we posted the link. If you want to listen on, you can listen online through Blog Talk Radio also. So if you reaching your data limit or something like that, you can call and listen by phone, or listen to the audio through the internet as well. All right. Okay. If you need me to post that link again, let me know. Elmore Bowling, who LeGrand Clegg talked about in the article from the LA Times. Elmore Bowling defied the odds against African-American men and built several successful businesses during the harsh era of Jim Crow segregation in the South. He had more money than a lot of white men, or a lot of whites, which his descendants believe was all it took to get him lynched in 1947. He was shot to death by a white neighbor, according to news accounts at the time, and the shooter was never prosecuted. But Bowling's name is now listed among thousands of new memorial victims of hate-inspired lynchings that terrorized generations of African Americans in the U.S. Now, his daughter's name is Josephine Bowling McCall. And she's anxious to see the monument, located about 20 miles from where her father was killed in rural Lowndes County. Now, if you know anything about Alabama, you know that Alabama was ground zero for the fight for the Voting Rights Act of 1965. If you know anything about Alabama, you know about Lowndes County, Alabama. Lowndes County, Alabama, is where in 1965, Stokely Carmichael, later Kwame Ture, founded the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, the LCFO, the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, which was a political party. And the symbol for this political party was a Black Panther. And it's going to be Bobby Seale and Huey P. Newton, who are going to meet Stokely Carmichael in 1966, Berkeley, California. Stokely Carmichael, later Kwame Ture, is speaking at a college there, and he talks to them, and they get permission from him to use the symbol of the Black Panther for the organization that they were organizing, called the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense. The Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, founded October 16, 1966 in Oakland, California. That was a political party as well. And when you research the Lowndes County Freedom Organization, you find out that every political party has to have a symbol. So they chose the Black Panther for their symbol, okay? And just so people understand, this is something I deal with in my presentations, dealing with the Black Panther. I deal with this history, one. Two, the character of the Black Panther, created by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, was first introduced in July 1966, issue 52 of the Fantastic Four. So it came out before the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense came out, just so people understand. Okay, so Josephine Bowling McCall is Elmore Bowling's daughter, all right? Now, the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, opening Thursday, April 26th, is a project of the nonprofit Equal Justice Initiative, a legal advocacy group in Montgomery, Alabama, okay? The organization says the combined museum and memorial will be the nation's first site to document racial inequality in America from slavery through Jim Crow to the issues of today. And all this history is connected. All this history is connected. The debate over the Confederate monuments in Alabama, they're saying, the governor in Alabama is saying, we're not taking down Confederate monuments, okay? They don't want to admit to the white supremacy and racism. Okay, and at the same time, when they have these Confederate Memorial Days and celebrate this, they don't want to talk about the atrocities of slavery and how these states seceded from the Union to maintain slavery because their wealth was tied to slavery. They don't want to talk about that, okay? And then when you look at the Confederate monuments, right, the question we should ask ourselves is, how is it that there were only 11 states in the Confederate States of America, the Confederacy, from 1861 to 1865. There were 11 states, but there are 31 states that have Confederate monuments honoring traitors to the Union. That doesn't even make sense. But when you understand why they were erected to terrorize African Americans largely. They weren't erected right after the Civil War ended in 1865, June 2nd, 1865. Civil War ends. They weren't erected right after that. The majority of them, you have two main periods of time when these Confederate monuments are erected, 1895 to 1915. So the year before Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896, and the second year of World War I in 1915 also basically marks the first year of the Great Migration, which is from 1915 to 1960. Okay, so you have that period of time, and you have a lot of racial lynchings, things like this taking place, terrorism against African Americans to keep us in our place. And then from 1955 to 1970, okay? 1955 is the year after Brown versus Board of Education, desegregation case, okay? And you're gonna have a whole lot of these monuments erected after that in direct opposition to Brown versus Board of Education, in direct opposition to desegregation, in direct opposition to civil rights for African Americans. And a lot of the schools that are named after Confederate generals and Confederate soldiers and things like this, a lot of that came right after Brown versus Board of Education as direct opposition to desegregation. Okay, so we have to really understand this history. And Roland Martin on the Tom Jordan Morning Show interviewed Brian Stevenson. If you go to blackamericaweb.com, blackamericaweb.com, you can listen to the interview. And they talked about how in Germany, There are no monuments to Adolf Hitler in Germany. There are no schools named after Nazis in Germany. They don't have buildings named after Nazis and things like that. No. Now they teach the history in the schools because they don't want it to happen again. But they don't celebrate and honor Hitler. Okay. And also, speaking of Hitler, today is the anniversary of Hitler killing himself as well. Today is the anniversary of Hitler committing suicide. We posted the article on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, from history.com, official website of the History Channel, because I get their emails every day. 1945, April 30th, Adolf Hitler commits suicide. Okay. And we'll post this article here as well on the thread of the broadcast on Facebook. We'll put it in Crowdcast as well. But check that out, history.com, special website of the History Channel. So today's the anniversary of Hitler killing himself. So it's interesting that we talk about this history on that day as well. This was during World War II. Okay, so the sites include a memorial. Also, let me back up here just a second. Okay, so the organization says the combined museum and memorial will be the nation's first site to document racial inequality in America, from slavery through Jim Crow to the issues of the day. Quote, in the American South, we don't talk about slavery. We don't have monuments and memorials that confront the legacy of lynching. We have not really confronted the difficulties of segregation. And because of that, I think we are still burdened by that history, said Brian Stevenson, executive director of the Equal Justice Initiative. Okay, so the site includes a memorial to the victims of 4,400 terror lynchings of African Americans in 800 U.S. counties from 1877 to 1950. All except 300 of these lynchings were in the South. All except 300 were in the South. And prosecutions were rare in any of the cases. Brian Stevenson said they emphasized the lynching era because he believes it's an aspect of the nation's racial history that is discussed the least. He said most people in this country can't name a single African American who was lynched between 1877 and 1950, even though thousands of African Americans were subjected to this violence. Okay. All right. So you can check out the rest of that article. That's at AtlantaBlackStar.com. Has an article. It's from the Associated Press, so a lot of news outlets picked up this article. Okay. From AtlantaBlackStar.com. It's called We Don't Confront the Legacy of Lynching. New memorial offers chance to remember, heal. Okay. We don't confront the legacy of lynching. New memorial offers chance to remember, heal. Okay, now, if we look at, just a second here, if we look at the Red Summer of 1919, we're going to see over 25 major race riots that take place during the Red Summer. And we're going to see that you have the Elaine, Arkansas race riot of 1919. The Elaine, Arkansas race riot of 1919. Okay. Now, the Red Summer takes place the year after the World War I ends. And you have somewhere around 300 and I think somewhere around 370,000 African American men who served in World War I. Okay, yeah, about 370,000. You're going to have about 5 million men, or most of them white, who serve in World War I. Okay, World War I is 1914 and 1918. This is why you have to understand the chronology of history. Historical events don't happen in a vacuum. They are the culmination of a sequence of historical events that have a domino effect and lead up to a larger event taking place. One of my teachers, Professor Kaba Kamene, formerly known as Booker T. Coleman, who's in the Hidden Colors documentaries, we're in the Black Friday documentaries together. He talks about how to understand the existence of something, you first must understand the pre-existence of existence. To understand the existence of something, you first must understand the pre-existence of existence, okay? So World War One, because you have all these white men going to fight in World War One, is going to create a labor vacuum. The factories in the North still need employees. So what do? They lure the African Americans from the South up north to go work in these plants. It wasn't just the auto industry that caused the Great Migration. It was largely, it was World War One, then it's going to continue also in World War Two. Okay. And you're going to have African Americans going up and starting about 1908, even before then. But when we look at the Great Migration, it's looked at basically starting in 1915 to 1960. Okay. All right. So when these white men come back home, right? What happens is they had jobs before they left. Now they come back home and it's African Americans and immigrants doing these jobs. Okay. So now these white men can't find jobs. And this caused race riots in the streets because you have these white men who now they've come back and they have military training. They know how to fight, how to kill. They're bringing back weaponry with them. Okay. You have African Americans, men who served in World War One. They come back. They come back with skills on how to fight and how to kill, and they're defending their communities. They're defending themselves. All right. And then at the same time, what takes place is you're going to have what's called the new Negro. The new Negro, right around 1920, 1919, 1920. The new Negro is a new way of thinking among African Americans, especially African American men. And they said, we went to fight in this war for America, and we want all of our rights right now. They said, we're not going to deal with this segregation. We're not going to deal with the Jim Crow laws. We're not going to deal with the disrespect. We shed blood for this country. They said, we want all of our rights right now. So it was a new sense of pride. Okay. And you're going to have over 25 major race riots in this country in 1919. Okay. So when we look at the Elaine, Arkansas race riot, and is also looked at as the mass lynching massacre. There's an article from the Daily Beast, thedailybeast.com, America's Forgotten Mass Lynching, when 237 people were murdered in Arkansas. Okay. In 1919, in the wake of World War I, Black sharecroppers unionized in Arkansas, unleashing a wave of white vigilantism and mass murder that left 237 people dead. Okay, this is an article from February 16th, 2015 by David Krugler for the dailybeast.com. There's also an article from blackpast.org, and BlackPast, they have about 13,000 articles dealing with African history, African American history. They have an article called Elaine, Arkansas Riot of 1919. Elaine, Arkansas Riot of 1919. Okay. So also you have to understand that the film The Birth of a Nation is going to contribute to a lot of this racial hatred. The film The Birth of a Nation debuts February 8th, 1915. Okay. Is based upon a novel by a man named Thomas Dixon. The name of the novel is called The Klansman. And what happens is that the film is made, is directed by D.W. Griffith. Cost $100,000 to make the film. The most expensive film at the time. It's also the longest film at the time. It's 3 hours. Okay, and we just posted the link again there on the thread of the broadcast on Facebook. If you want to register for the online courses that I teach dealing with our history, we have a bundle pack right now on sale, like $60, regularly about $130, about 10 courses. It includes understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, and some other things. They're all on demand. So as soon as you register, you can start watching. They're all on demand. Okay. Okay. So the movie The Birth of a Nation is going to rejuvenate the Ku Klux Klan. All right. Once again, you have to understand history. So the Ku Klux Klan was founded in Pulaski, Tennessee, December 24th, 1865. So the 13th Amendment, right? The 13th Amendment, which legally freed enslaved Africans, is ratified December 6, 1865. It's adopted December 18th, 1865. And 6 days later, on Christmas Eve, you have a terrorist organization formed called the Ku Klux Klan in Pulaski, Tennessee. So, and you know, they're going to terrorize African Americans. They're going to terrorize white Republicans as well, because it was the Republicans were looked at as the enemies of the Democrats, because the Republicans are the ones looked at for free as freeing the slaves. So the Democrats were the party of the South. They were the party of the plantation owners. Okay, so what happens is by 1915, the Ku Klux Klan had largely died out by then, because a lot of the former Confederate soldiers were dead by 1915. You're talking about 50 years after the Civil War ends. So the movie The Birth of a Nation shows the Ku Klux Klan as the hero. The film takes place during slavery, Civil War, and Reconstruction. And it shows a group of Union Negro soldiers, former Union Negro soldiers, coming to this town. I think it's in Virginia, South Carolina. It's a southern town. And they're dominating white people, pushing white people around, oppressing them. They make fun of African Americans in Congress, because you're going to have African Americans in Congress during the Reconstruction era. Okay. And what happens is they show, black men trying to rape white virgins in the movie, things like this. So at the end of the movie, the Ku Klux Klan rises up and puts down this rebellion of these Union Negro soldiers. And it's said to be, the birth of a nation. So the Klan was looked at as the heroes of the film. So in newspapers, where you would have ads promoting the film The Birth of a Nation, the Ku Klux Klan oftentimes would take out recruiting ads next to the ad for the movie. Okay? So this rejuvenated the Ku Klux Klan. Then this is during, so this is 1915, this movie comes out. This is during World War I. As African Americans are migrating from the South up north into these northern cities, Detroit, Chicago, Illinois, Gary, Indiana, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, things like this. This increases racial tensions in these northern cities. This puts a strain on city services. This creates more competition for jobs, because there's still white men behind, right? But they see these African Americans moving up. This creates racial tensions, jealousy, etc. And then you have the Ku Klux Klan that's gaining steam again. Then these white men come back in 1919, and you have an explosion. It was called the Red Summer because James Weldon Johnson said the cities of America, their streets were flowing with blood. That's why it's called the Red Summer. Okay, so if we look at the 1919, year after the Civil War ends, we look at this race riot in Elaine, Arkansas. So the article says the visits began in the fall of 1918, just as World War I ended. At his office in Little Rock, Arkansas, attorney Ulysses S. Bratton listened as African American sharecroppers from the Delta told stories of theft, exploitation, and endless debt. Theft, exploitation, and endless debt. A man named Carter had tended 90 acres of cotton, only to have his landlord seize the entire crop and his possessions. From the town of Ratio in Phillips County, Arkansas, an African American farmer reported that a plantation manager refused to give sharecroppers an itemized account for their crop. Another sharecropper told of a landlord trying to quote, to starve the people into selling the cotton at his own price. They ain't allowing us down there room to move our feet except to go to the field, end quote. So you have to understand, sharecropping comes into existence and popularity after the Civil War ends, when the South is trying to figure out, okay, so during Reconstruction, the South was devastated during the Civil War. So during Reconstruction, the South is being rebuilt, and they're trying to figure out, okay, who's going to plant the crops? Who's going to till the soil? Who's going to do this work? Because white people don't want to do this. So the sharecropping system is created, and they're using the black codes that regulate the movements of African Americans and criminalize them for all different types of things, vagrancy laws. In a lot of these southern states, what they're going to do is they're going to require African Americans to have labor contracts with plantations. And this is going to lock a lot of them to, some of the plantations they were free from. So they're trying to lock African Americans into agriculture, lock them into agriculture. And in some southern states, they're going to be required to pay a tax if they want to have some type of profession or job outside of agriculture or being a domestic. History.com has an article on the Black Codes, the official website of the History Channel. They have an article on the Black Codes and one on sharecropping as well. Okay. And these are going to be used to lock African Americans into agriculture to exploit their labor once again. The labor was exploited for 246 years from 1619 to 1865. Okay, now they're using another legal system to exploit their labor, and they're going to use the convict leasing system of 1865 to 1928 also to exploit their labor when they become prisoners. And they're working on railroads, they're working in coal mines, they're being leased out to corporations, all different types of horrific work, okay? You had the convict leasing system and you had a sharecropping system designed to exploit the labor of African Americans after slavery ends. So no one could know it at the time, but within a year, these inauspicious meetings would lead to one of the worst episodes of racial violence in U.S. history. Initiated by whites, the violence, by any measure, a massacre, claimed the lives of 237 African Americans, according to a just released report from the Equal Justice Initiative. That's Brian Stevenson, the Equal Justice Initiative. They're doing the work. The death toll was unusually high. The death toll was unusually high, but the use of racial violence to subjugate African Americans during this time was not uncommon. As the Equal Justice Initiative observes, quote, racial terror lynching was a tool used to enforce Jim Crow laws and racial segregation, a tactic for maintaining racial control by victimizing the entire African American community, not merely punishment of an alleged perpetrator for a crime, but to terrorize the entire African American community. Now, what people have to understand is when you have African Americans fighting for a Civil Rights Act in 1964 and tearing down the Jim Crow laws of the South. This was not because they wanted to sit next to white people at a lunch counter, people who think that have not studied the history. Number one, they said we want all of our rights right now. Just like the new Negro in 1919 and 1920, they came back from World War I. They said we want all of our rights right now. Two, one of the reasons why they were tearing down the walls of Jim Crow is because if they remove the Jim Crow laws, then you're also attacking the racial terror that was inflicted upon them to enforce the Jim Crow laws. So the people who think that that the reason why the civil rights movement existed was because we wanted to sit at white lunch counters, they haven't studied. That's not why. They haven't studied the history. No, they wanted first-class citizenship. They wanted all of their rights right now. It wasn't about abandoning their businesses, anything like that. But they were also attacking the racial terror that was inflicted upon them to enforce Jim Crow. So people who say, oh, well, we should have stayed segregated, you haven't studied the racial terror enforced upon us to maintain segregation. You're dealing with you're dealing with a romanticized version of segregation. Okay, so the death toll was unusually high, but the use of racial violence to subjugate blacks during this time was not uncommon. As the Equal Justice Initiative observes, quote, racial terror lynching was a tool used to enforce Jim Crow and racial segregation, a tactic for maintaining racial control by victimizing the entire African American community, not merely punishment of an alleged perpetrator for a crime. This was certainly true of the massacre in Phillips County in Arkansas. Okay, we'll come to that in just a second. How's everybody doing? Those on Facebook, share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. Hey, this is Michael. For those just tuning in, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. We're talking about how lynchings were used to destroy black economic competition. Okay, how white America used lynchings to destroy black economic competition. There's a whole history behind this. All right. Also on Facebook, hey, we have I forgot to tell you, we have an 8 DVD Black Panther bundle pack at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Just posted the information there for it on the thread of the broadcast on Facebook. You get 2 of my lectures dealing with the film Black Panther. There are 3 documentaries there, and some of my other lectures also. It's $130 value on sale, $80. Includes 2 documentaries I'm in, Black Friday Part 2, dealing with economic empowerment for African Americans, and Elementary Genocide Part 3, which deals with fighting against the school-to-prison pipeline and taking control of our children's education. That's at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right. Okay, so let's go back to this article here. This is dealing with the Elaine, Arkansas race riot in 1919, year after World War I ends. So attorney, Little Rock, Arkansas attorney Ulysses S. Branton, okay, agreed to represent the cheated sharecroppers because they were coming to his law office talking about how they were being cheated by these white plantation owners, okay? And so he agreed to represent the cheated sharecroppers, who also joined a new union called the Progressive Farmers and Household Union of America. The Progressive Farmers and Household Union of America. Okay, they were organizing themselves. Its founder, a Black Delta native named Robert Hill, had no prior organizing experience, but plenty of ambition. The union wants to know why it is that the laborers cannot control their just earnings, which they work for, Hill announced as he urged Black sharecroppers to each recruit 25 prospective members to form a lodge. Now, Robert Hill was especially successful in Phillips County, okay, in Arkansas, where 7 lodges were established in 1919. It took a lot of courage to defy the Arkansas Delta's white elite. Men such as E.M. Allen, Mort was his nickname, E.M. Allen, controlled the local economy, government, law enforcement, and courts. E.M. Allen was a latter-day carpetbagger, a northerner who came to Arkansas in 1906 to make his fortune. He married well and formed a partnership with a wealthy businessman. Together, they developed the town of Elaine, Arkansas, a hub for the thriving lumber industry. Now, E.M. Allen and the county's white landowners understood that their continued prosperity depended on the exploitation of Black sharecroppers and laborers. Let me repeat this. E.M. Allen and the county's white landowners understood that their continued prosperity depended on the exploitation of African American sharecroppers and laborers. When you look at the 11 states that succeeded from the Union, in their statements of succession, they talked about how slavery was central to maintaining their wealth, maintaining their prosperity, maintaining their way of life. So they succeeded to maintain their way of life and to keep enslaved Africans, depriving them of their humanity and their freedom so that these Confederate states can maintain theirs. This is why all those Confederate monuments need to be removed. They need to be removed because they were symbols of racial terror erected to keep African Americans in their place. They need to be put in museums. They need to be put in museums. That's where they belong. In their place needs to be a historical marker that tells what was there, why it was removed, the history of it. And then the next step is to correct the history taught in the schools. Because incorrect history is taught in the schools, you have people who grow up that don't understand this history, don't understand why those monuments are there. And this also creates a racial backlash and racial insensitivity to African Americans who try to get their issues addressed, because all this stuff is the backlash of bad public policies, of bad laws, bad public policies. Okay. And then when we try to get our issues addressed, because they were created by public policies, slavery was public policy. These were laws. Slavery, Jim Crow, these were all laws. Okay. When we try to get these issues addressed, we're dealing with people who largely don't even understand this history. Okay. All right. So E.M. Allen married well and formed a partnership with the wealthy businessman. Together, they developed the town of Elaine, Arkansas, a hub for the thriving lumber industry. Okay. Allen and the county's white landowners understood that their continued prosperity depended on the exploitation of Black sharecroppers and laborers. In a county where more than 75% of the population was African American, this was not a task to be taken lightly. In February of 1919, the planters agreed to reduce the acreage of cotton in cultivation in anticipation of a post-war drop in demand. So the war is over with, you need less cotton, because cotton is going to be used for different things, clothing, different things for the war effort. Cotton was used. Okay. If they gave their tenants a fair settlement, their profits would shrink further. E.M. Allen spoke for the planters, these white planters, these white plantation owners, when he declared that quote, the old Southern methods are much the best. The old Southern methods are much the best, end quote, and that the quote Southern men can handle the Negroes all right and peaceably, end quote. There was nothing peaceable about the methods used to demolish the Sharecroppers Union. So late on the night of September 30th, 1919, the planters dispatched 3 men to break up a Union meeting in a rough-hewn Black church at Hoop Spur, a crossroads 3 miles north of Elaine, Arkansas. Prepare for trouble. The sharecroppers had assigned 6 men to patrol outside the church. When we look at the article from blackpast.org dealing with this also, they talk about how you had approximately 100. So on the night of September 30th, 1919, you had approximately 100 African Americans, mostly sharecroppers, on the plantations of white landowners. And they attended a meeting of the Progressive Farmers and Household Union of America at the church, Hoop Spur Church. They hoped to organize to obtain better payments for their cotton crops. Aware of the fears of communist influence on Blacks that helped contribute to racial violence throughout the nation earlier that year, the Union posted armed guards around the church to prevent disruption and infiltration. So during the meeting, 3 individuals pulled up to the front of the church. One of the men said something, so that there were words exchanged, and then gunfire erupted after the guards made no response. Okay. Though sharp debate exists as to who fired first, the black guards shot to death a white security officer from the Missouri Pacific Railroad. His name was W.A. Aikens. And they also, W.A. Aikens, and they also injured Charles Pratt, the county's white deputy sheriff. The next morning, a posse was sent to arrest the suspects. Though they encountered little opposition from the African American community, the fact that African Americans outnumbered whites 10-1 in this area resulted in great fear of an insurrection. The concerned whites formed a mob numbering up to 1,000 armed white men, many of whom came from the surrounding counties and as far away as Mississippi and Tennessee. Okay, now they are in Elaine, Arkansas. The mob, upon reaching Elaine, Arkansas, began killing African Americans and ransacking their homes. As word of the attack spread within the Elaine, Arkansas African American community, some residents fled while others armed themselves in defense. The mob then turned its attention to disarming those African Americans who fought back. So you have this taking place. You have these fights, these gun battles taking place. The planters also mobilized Sheriff Frank Kitchens, deputized. The planters also mobilized. So Sheriff Frank Kitchens deputized a massive white posse, even setting up a headquarters at the courthouse in the county seat of Helena to organize his recruits. Hundreds of white veterans, former World War I veterans, hundreds of white veterans recently returning from military service in France flocked to the courthouse. Dividing into small groups, the armed white men set out into the countryside to search for the sharecroppers. The posse believed that a black conspiracy to murder white planters had just begun, and that they must do whatever it took to put down the alleged uprising. The result was the killing of 237 African Americans. None of the perpetrators, participants in mass murder, answered for their crimes. None of the perpetrators, none of the white perpetrators who killed these African American men answered for their crimes. No one was charged. No trials were held, and at least not of those who had killed African Americans. In the early 20th century, the 1900s, in the early 20th century, state-sanctioned collective violence targeting African Americans was a common occurrence in the United States. 1919 was an especially bloody year. By September 1919, the nation had already experienced 7 major outbreaks of anti-black violence, commonly called race riots. Riots had flared in cities as different as Knoxville, Tennessee, Omaha, Nebraska, and Washington, D.C. In Chicago, a lakefront altercation between whites and blacks escalated into a week-long riot that took the lives of 38 men, 23 African American, 15 white. To restore order, Illinois Governor Frank Loudon called in thousands of state militia. Now, the riot in Chicago, and let me pull up this article here from history.com. So the riot in Chicago race riot in 1919, the Red Summer. You got to research the Red Summer, okay? And Chicago Tribune has a big article on the Red Summer also. On July 27, 1919, an African-American teenager drowned in Lake Michigan after violating the unofficial segregation of Chicago's beaches and being stoned by a group of white youth. His death and the police's refusal to arrest the white man whom eyewitnesses identified as causing it sparked a week of rioting between gangs of African American and white Chicagoans, concentrated on the South Side neighborhood surrounding the stockyards. When the riots ended on August 3rd, 1919, 15 whites and 23 African Americans have been killed and more than 500 people injured. An additional 1,000 African American families had lost their homes when they were torched by rioters. Okay? The Red Summer of 1919 marked the culmination of steadily growing tensions surrounding the Great Migration of African Americans from the rural South to the cities of the North that took place during World War I. This is what I was just talking about a few minutes ago. When the war ended in late 1918, thousands of servicemen returned home from fighting in Europe to find that their jobs in factories, warehouses, and mills had been filled by newly arrived Southern blacks or immigrants. Amid financial insecurity, racial and ethnic prejudices ran rampant. Meanwhile, African American veterans who had risked their lives fighting for the causes of freedom and democracy found themselves denied basic rights such as adequate housing and equality under the law, leading them to become increasingly militant. In the summer of 1919, Richard J. Daley, who served as Chicago's powerful mayor from 1955 until his death in 1976, he was 17 years old at this time, and a member of an Irish American organization called the Hamburg Athletic Club. Though an investigation later identified the club among the instigators of the rioting, Richard J. Daley and his supporters never admitted that he participated in the violence. In this fraught atmosphere, the white supremacist Ku Klux Klan organization revived its violent activities in the South because they were rejuvenated by the movie The Birth of a Nation in 1915. This included in 64 lynchings in 1918 and 83 lynchings in 1919. In the summer of 1919, race riots would break out in Washington, D.C., Knoxville, Tennessee, Longview, Texas, Phillips County, Arkansas, like the one we're talking about. That's the Elaine, Arkansas riot in 1919, in Phillips County, Omaha, Nebraska, and most dramatically, Chicago, Illinois. The city's African-American population had increased from 44,000 in 1909 in Chicago to more than 100,000 as of 1919. Over a 10-year period of time, the African-American population in Chicago goes from 44,000 to 100,000, and more than doubles. Competition for jobs in the city's stockyards was particularly intense, pitting African-Americans against whites, both native-born and immigrants. Tensions ran highest on the city's south side, where the great majority of African-American residents live like they do today. It's because of segregation. That's historical. That's historical. There's a reason why African-Americans are segregated in Chicago. Many of them in old, dilapidated housing and without adequate services. On July 27, 1919, a 17-year-old African-American boy named Eugene Williams was swimming with friends in Lake Michigan when he crossed, listen to this, he crossed the unofficial barrier located at 29th Street between the city's white and black beaches. A group of white men threw stones at Eugene Williams, hitting him, and he drowned. Okay, can y'all still hear me? Can y'all still hear me? Okay. So they hit him and he drowned. They threw stones at him, hit him and he drowned. He crossed the unofficial barrier between the white beach and the black beach, and they killed him. A group of white men threw stones at Eugene Williams, 17 years old, hitting him and he drowned. When police officers arrived on the scene, they refused to arrest the white man whom African American eyewitnesses pointed to as the responsible party. Angry crowds began to gather on the beach, and reports of the incident, many of them distorted or exaggerated, spread quickly. Violence soon broke out between gangs and mobs of African Americans and whites, concentrated in the South Side neighborhood surrounding the stockyards. After police were unable to quell the riots, the state militia was called in on the fourth day, but the fighting continued until August 3rd, 1919. Shootings, beatings, and arson attacks eventually left 15 whites and 23 African Americans dead and more than 500 more people injured. Around 60% of the injured were African Americans. An additional 1,000 African American families were left homeless after rioters torched their residences. So what was the lasting impact of this? In the aftermath of the rioting in Chicago, some suggested implementing zoning laws to formally segregate housing in Chicago. or restrictions preventing African Americans from working alongside whites in the stockyards and other industries. Such measures were rejected by African American and liberal white voters, however. City officials instead organized the Chicago Commission on Race Relations to look into the root causes of the riots and find ways to combat them, kind of like the Kerner Commission of organized July 28th, 1967 by President Lyndon Johnson. The commission, which included 6 white men and 6 African Americans, suggested several key issues, including competition for jobs, inadequate housing options for blacks, inconsistent law enforcement, and pervasive racial discrimination. But improvement in these areas would be slow in the years to come. President Woodrow Wilson, who was a white supremacist, publicly blamed whites for being the instigators of race-related riots in both Chicago and Washington, D.C., and introduced efforts to foster racial harmony, including voluntary organizations and congressional legislation. In addition to drawing attention to the growing tensions in America's urban centers, the riots in Chicago and other cities in the summer of 1919, the Red Summer, marked the beginning of a growing willingness among African Americans to fight for their rights in the face of oppression and injustice. Okay, so read this article. So this deals with the Chicago race riot in 1919. During the Red Summer, Chicago race riot in 1919. Most people don't know about this, but this is one of the main reasons why you have rampant segregation in Chicago today. All right, we'll pull that's at history.com. History.com is the official website of the History Channel. Okay. So let's go back to the Elaine, Arkansas race riot in 1919. 237 African Americans killed. So none of the perpetrators, participants in mass murder, answered for their crimes. Okay. How's everybody doing? Everybody watching, share this broadcast on your own Facebook page. We got Kanisha, we've got David, we got Latoya. How y'all like this type of information? All right. And then also we're broadcasting on Blog Talk Radio, our Blog Talk Radio channel, blogtalkradio.com/The African History Network Show, blogtalkradio.com/The African History Network Show. So you can listen there. You can also call in and listen at 914-338-1375, 914-338-1375 is the call-in number as well, 914-338-1375. You can listen there also. All right. So very quickly here, if you like this type of information, we have our 8-DVD Black Panther bundle pack that includes 2 of my lectures dealing with the film Black Panther, some other presentations like presentations dealing with Malcolm X, The Light of Ancient Egypt Awakens the African Mind. Then it includes 3 documentaries as well, 1804, Hidden History of the Haitian Revolution, Elementary Genocide 3, and Black Friday Part 2. I'm in Black Friday Part 2 and Elementary Genocide 3. So that bundle pack is on sale $80, regularly $130 at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We just posted information there on the thread of the broadcast. And then also you can register. I teach online classes as well, online courses. They're all on demand. We have a bundle pack. I put a bundle of about 10 of them together, and that's on sale $60. That includes Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. That is a 14-hour, 7-session online course that I teach. And we do 1,000 years of history. It's about 20 hours of bonus content. All right. So if you like this type of information, all that helps to support the African History Network, helps us to stay on the air, keep doing the research, pay the bills, etc. Okay, so let's continue. And we'll come to some of your comments in just a minute here. All right, so none of the perpetrators were arrested. The white men who were involved in killing African Americans, these sharecroppers. No one was charged. No trials were held. At least not of those who had killed African Americans. So in the early 20th century, state-sanctioned collective violence targeted African Americans was a common occurrence in the United States. 1919 was an especially bloody year. By September 1919, the nation had already experienced 7 major outbreaks of anti-Black violence, commonly called race riots. Riots have flared in cities as different as Knoxville, Tennessee, Omaha, and Washington, D.C. In Chicago, a lakefront altercation between whites and blacks escalated into a week-long riot. We just talked about that. To restore order, Illinois Governor Frank Loudon called in thousands of state militia. The root cause of 1919's violence was the reassertion of white supremacy after World War I. The reassertion of white supremacy after World War I. Disfranchisement, Jim Crow laws, and biased police forces and courts had stripped African Americans of many of their constitutional rights and created deep-set economic, social, and political inequities. Economic, social, and political inequities. African Americans who defied the rules and traditions of white supremacy risked personal ruin. Being banished from their hometowns was one punishment. Bodily harm, beatings and whippings, and death. In just 5 months in 1919, from January to May, more than 20 lynch mobs murdered 24 African Americans. One of these victims was an African American veteran killed for refusing to stop wearing his Army uniform. It was his uniform. He served in the war. It was his uniform. Lynchers took pride in their actions, often posing for photographs at the scenes of their crimes. Few were ever charged, let alone convicted. Mob violence helped protect the racial status quo. Mob violence helped protect the racial status quo. So once again, when I talk about the civil rights movement and the Civil Rights Act of 64, the Civil Rights Act of 64, when people think that this was about African Americans wanted to sit at white lunch counters and things like this, they were tearing down the walls of segregation because, number one, they wanted first-class citizenship. They wanted all their rights now. Two, they were also attacking the racial violence that was used to enforce segregation, the lynchings, all this stuff, the beatings, okay? They're fighting against the White Citizens Council. The White Citizens Council was formed in Mississippi in 1954 as a direct backlash to Brown versus Board of Education desegregation case. And the White Citizens Council was formed by white bankers and businessmen, landowners, politicians, things like this. And they were like the Ku Klux Klan without the hood, because they worked to maintain segregation. If you were African American and you tried to register to vote, if you were a farmer and had a loan at the bank, they may call your loan in. Okay, if you try to register to vote, they may fire you from your job. When you study Fannie Lou Hamer, Fannie Lou Hamer came out of Mississippi. Fannie Lou Hamer was the youngest of 19 or 20 children. Okay, and they worked on a plantation. Okay, they picked cotton. Her whole family, they worked on a plantation. And she was fired from the plantation that they worked on, not because she voted, but because she registered to vote. Okay, just people have to understand the oppressive conditions that we were dealing with. Just registering to vote could get you fired from your job. Even though the 15th Amendment of 1870 guaranteed the right to vote for African Americans. Guaranteed the right to vote for African American men. Then the 19th Amendment of 1920 gave the right to vote to women. But the 15th Amendment of 1870 guaranteed the right to vote for African American men. Okay, so let's continue here. All right, so lynchers took pride in their actions, often posing for photographs at the scenes of their crimes. Few were ever charged, let alone convicted. And we've all seen the postcards. They actually would take pictures of these lynching scenes and make postcards out of them and sell them. Mob violence helped protect the racial status quo. What made 1919 unique was the armed resistance that African Americans mounted against white mobs trying to keep them in their place. Let me repeat this. What made 1919 unique was the armed resistance that Black Americans mounted against white mobs trying to keep them in their place. During the United States' brief but transformative involvement in World War I, almost 370,000 Black men served in the military, most of them in the Army. On the home front, African American men and women bought war bonds, volunteered for the Red Cross, and worked in defense factories. They were fighting to make the world safe for democracy, as President Woodrow Wilson defined the war's purpose. Yet they did not have equal rights and opportunities at home. When the war ended, African Americans resolved to make America safe for democracy. Now, also around this time, you're going to have the rise of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and Marcus Garvey. So you're going to have the Marcus Garvey movement, because Garvey comes to the U.S. in 1916. He comes a year after Booker T. Washington dies. Booker T. Washington dies in 1915. Former slave Booker T. Washington, Tuskegee Institute, right? Harriet Tubman dies in 1913. Former slave, 1913. Association for the Study of Negro Life and History is founded in September 1915, co-founded by Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Okay? So you're going to have all this going on around the same time. All right, so they were fighting to make the world safe for democracy, as President Woodrow Wilson defined the war's purpose, yet they didn't have equal rights and opportunities at home. When the war ended, African Americans resolved to make America safe for democracy. In May of 1919, civil rights activist and prolific writer Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois declared, quote, "We return from fighting. We return fighting. Make way for democracy. We saved it in France, and by the great Jehovah, we will save it in the United States of America, or know the reason why. We return from fighting in World War I. We return fighting. Coming back home, got to fight for your rights." Okay. Whether they had served in the military or not, African Americans answered Dr. W.B. Du Bois' clarion call. When a white mob in Longview, Texas, tried to grab a Black man named S.L. Jones to lynch him for insulting the honor of a white woman, a self-defense force organized by Jones's friends opened fire, dispersing the mob and saving S.L. Jones' life. When police in Chicago failed to stop white gangs from attacking African Americans, veterans of the 370th Regiment, 93rd Division, which was an all-Black unit recently returned from France, put on their uniforms, armed themselves, and took to the streets. And when white servicemen and veterans joined with civilians to form mobs in Washington, D.C., hundreds of African-American Washingtonians lined the streets of Uptown, now called Shaw, to prevent these mobs from marauding in the neighborhood known for its African-American-owned businesses and theaters. So you had these African-American servicemen, because I told you, these brothers came back from World War I. They came back with skills on how to fight, how to kill. They know how to use weapons. And they're going to use this to protect the community. Okay? When you look at Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the attack on Black Wall Street, June 1st, 1921. And I have a 2.5-hour lecture I've done dealing with the history of Black Wall Street. I'm also in a documentary, Resurrecting Black Wall Street, the Blueprint, from Dr. Boyce Watkins. You had a lot of former World War I veterans in Black Wall Street as well. So when the attack happens, these brothers are armed. They're shooting back. Now, they were outnumbered, but they're shooting back also. They didn't just lay down. Not only that, when you had a mob of 500 white men who are armed, who are outside of the sheriff's jail, and they wanted to take Dick Rowland out and lynch him. So Dick Rowland was the 19-year-old black boy, black man, who's a man, who when he was entering the elevator in an office building, he stumbles and reaches out and grabs the arm of a white 17-year-old girl who was the elevator operator. She screams. People think she's attacking her. He's attacking her, trying to rape her. This is how the rumor spread. Okay? You're going to have about 200 African-American men who are armed, who go to the jail to back up the sheriff to protect Dick Rowland, to keep this white mob from taking them out and lynching them. You had a lot of retired World War I veterans, African-American World War I veterans in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in Black Wall Street. Okay, so the Arkansas sharecroppers who stood up against the white planters of Phillips County were a major part of Black resistance during 1919. Their courage came with heavy costs. Their courage came with heavy costs. As word of the trouble spread, white vigilantes from Mississippi crossed the river and began attacking African Americans. The posse, organized by Sheriff Kitchens, scoured the cane brakes and fields, firing on African Americans. Meanwhile, Arkansas Governor Charles Breaux cabled the War Department to request the deployment of infantry units. Almost 600 white troops and officers soon arrived from Camp Pike, told that a Black uprising was underway. The soldiers rounded up African Americans and, like the Mississippi vigilantes and local posse, killing indiscriminately. A special agent for the Missouri Pacific Railroad, who led a force of approximately 50 white men, later said the Mississippi mob, quote, shot and killed men, women, and children without regard to whether they were guilty or innocent of any connection with the killing of anybody, or whether members of the Union or not, end quote. Okay, this is the sharecroppers union. Okay, one of the county's richest white men, his name was Gerald Lambert, Gerard Lambert, Lambert, observed soldiers shoot an African-American man who had tried to run from a hiding place. Let that, quote, be a lesson, end quote, the troops told Blacks who were also present. Vigilantes killed an African-American woman, pulled her dress over her head, and left her body on the road. Another brutal, quote-unquote, lesson of what happened when African-Americans forgot their, quote-unquote, place. It's their place that the Confederate monuments were largely erected to keep African-Americans in. They were designed to terrorize African-Americans, these Confederate monuments. That's why every last one of them needs to come down. The sharecroppers did the best they could to defend themselves and their families and neighbors. A group of sharecroppers and the Black veteran in uniform shot back when part of the posse opened fire. Hearing the shots, Union member Frank Moore rallied the men with him. Quote, let's go get help. Let's go help them people out. Let's go help them people out, he shouted. But the sharecroppers were outgunned and outmanned. By October 13th, 1919, most had been captured in jail. Sheriff's deputies and special agents for the Missouri Pacific Railroad tortured them to extract false confessions to a conspiracy to murder whites, okay? These were sheriff's deputies and special agents for the Missouri Pacific Railroad. Rigged trials brought swift convictions and death sentences for 12 African-American men whose only crime was their attempt to obtain fair earnings for their labor. Protracted appeals supported by the NAACP resulted in a Supreme Court decision of Moore versus Dempsey in 1923 that helped free the men. Let me repeat this. People talk about the NAACP. Look, there's some problem. There's some historical problems with the NAACP, but there are also a lot of good things the NAACP has done. All right, you have to study the history of the NAACP. Protracted appeals supported by the NAACP resulted in a Supreme Court decision, the Supreme Court decision of Moore versus Dempsey in 1923, that helped free the men. Okay, the ruling also established the federal government's obligation to ensure that state trial proceedings preserve the Constitution's guarantee of due process and equal protection of the laws, a standard the Arkansas trial certainly had not met. A standard the Arkansas trial has certainly not met. The legal victory could not give back the lives of the African-American residents killed by the posse, vigilantes, and troops in Phillips County. The death toll of 237 reported by the Equal Justice Initiative, that's Brian Stevenson. This is the organization that raised $20 million to build the Lynching Museum and the Lynching Memorial that just opened Thursday, April 26th in Montgomery, Alabama, okay, to commemorate the 4,400 African Americans who were victims of lynchings in this country from 1877 to 1950. This is the Equal Justice Initiative. The death toll of the 237 reported by the Equal Justice Initiative is a new figure. Okay, so this article came out in 2015 from the Daily Beast, but see, they've been doing the Equal Justice Initiative, they've been doing research. I've been following for about, I think, 4 years now. So the death toll of 237 reported by the Equal Justice Initiative is a new figure based on extensive research. In 1919, sources as varied as the NAACP and the Bureau of Investigation, and the Bureau of Investigation was the forerunner to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, also known as the FBI. They estimated the number of African Americans killed at 25 to 80. Writer Robert Whitaker, who has identified 20 separate killing sites of African Americans during the massacre, put the death toll at more than 100. NAACP official Walter White, who risked his life in October of 1919 to investigate the killings, stated that the, quote, number of Negroes killed during the riot is unknown and probably never will be known, end quote. In contrast, just 4 whites died, all of them posse members. 1 or 2 may have died as a result of friendly fire. And see, one of the things that the NAACP would do is investigate these lynchings, investigate these massacres, investigate sexual assaults on African American women. So many people know that Rosa Parks was a secretary for the NAACP in Montgomery, Alabama. But one of the things she used to do was investigate sexual assaults of African American women by white men. Say the number of African Americans killed in Phillips County, Arkansas in 1919 was 25 or 80 or 237. The very fact that almost 100 years after the massacre, we are still trying to pinpoint the death toll should lead us to a larger reckoning, coming to terms with one of the most violent years in the nation's history, bloodshed that resulted from efforts to make America safe for democracy. So that's history dealing with the Elaine, Arkansas race riot of 1919. That's an article from the dailybeast.com, America's Forgotten Mass Lynching, when 237 people were murdered in Arkansas. Okay, from the dailybeast.com. There are other articles about this. You got one from blackpast.org that I talked about, Elaine, Arkansas, Elaine, Elaine, Arkansas, riot 1919. All right, those watching on Facebook, how's everybody doing? Share this broadcast on your Facebook page. Invite your friends to tune in. Hey, this is Michael Imhotep, founder of the African History Network, host of the African History Network show. I'm a talk show host, researcher, lecturer, and writer. How's everybody doing? We got Cameron. Cameron said, I didn't know that about Rosa Parks. Oh, absolutely. That's something that Rosa Parks did. Okay, so a lot of people think Rosa Parks, just sat on the bus. No, that's his. And Rosa Parks was ran out of Montgomery, Alabama after the bus boycott was over with. She was ran out of Montgomery, Alabama by white supremacists. Okay, so if you like this type of information, be sure to register for the online courses that I teach. They're on demand. They're at our online school. We have a bundle pack of about 10 of them. We have a bundle pack special sale going on right now. They're on sale $60, regularly $130. It includes understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school, understanding the ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. That's a 14-hour, 7-session online course. We deal with thousands of years of history. It's a lot of information that we deal with. And I do PowerPoint presentations dealing with these different classes. Okay, so check that out. All right, so Latoya said they in everything, in phone companies, you name it, even online shopping, getting all our info. What are you talking about, Latoya? And then let's see here. Delacia said, great, Jackie, how you doing? Cameron, I didn't know that about Rosa Parks. Tanya, it is not enough just to know we are, what are we prepared to do with this information we're given? People's history and culture teaches them how to deal with the problems of the past and the present and the future to meet the needs of the community. One of the reasons why we keep going around in circles, because we don't understand our history. We don't understand how we dealt with the problems of the past. And so we don't understand this. People's history and culture gives them their foundation. It gives them their values, their interests, and their principles. Their values, interests, and principles influence their economic empowerment and influences the political empowerment. So unless that foundation is in place, you won't be able to control your economics. You won't know what to do with your economics. You won't be able to control your politics. You won't even understand what politics is. Politics is the legal distribution of scarce wealth, power, and resources, and the writing of laws, statutes, ordinances, amendments, and treaties, their adoption, interpretation, and enforcement. All this is interrelated, interconnected. You have to have the history and culture. Every ethnic group in America uses their history and culture to fight for scarce wealth, power, and resources. For the most part, our history and culture has been stripped of us, so we don't have that foundation in place, so everything else is out of whack. The foundation is not there. So I'm very familiar with this. Okay. Ganja said, rest in peace to the ones that wasn't counted. Latoya said they even got boxes hooked up in our homes. What are you talking about, Latoya? Michelle said the NAACP is a great organization founded by blacks and whites. NAACP was founded about 57 founders. 7 were African Americans, the rest were white and Jews. It was founded because of the Springfield, Illinois race riot of 1908. Okay, which was a northern riot. You had like 8 people killed. I think about 8 African Americans killed in that one. And because of that race riot, you're going to have people start thinking that they're going to need a multiracial coalition, because the Niagara movement that was founded in 1905, that was just African Americans, and that was Ida B. Wells, that was Dr. W.B. Du Bois, Ida B. Wells, and others. The Niagara movement came out of the Afro-American Council. The Afro-American Council was founded in 1898 by Thomas T. Fortune, or T. Thomas Fortune, and Bishop Alexander Walters. And you had Dr. W.B. Du Bois and others. They were members of that. And so by 1903, what happened with the Afro-American Council, because it was called Afro-American. The term Afro-American did not start in the 1960s. That goes back to the 1830s. Just like you have the, in Baltimore, you have the Afro-American newspaper, which was founded about 1882. The term Afro-American is old. That's not a new term. Just like the term African-American, that's not a new term. Reverend Jesse Jackson did not create the term African-American. If you think that, you need to do some research. The term African-American goes back to May 15th, 1782 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That's the earliest recorded usage of the term African-American. But not only that, April 3rd, 1964, in Cleveland, Ohio, Malcolm X's speech, The Ballad of the Bullet, he uses the term African-American and Afro-American in that speech. That's April 3rd, 1964. That's not a new term. It's just people who say Jesse Jackson created that haven't studied the history of it. He reintroduced the term. It's not a new term. Okay. Let's see. Cameron said, yeah, didn't they touch on that subject in the movie, The Great Debaters, Lincoln Lynching? Yeah, they did. They also talked about the fake Willie Lynch speech in 1712, because Willie Lynch never historically existed. Patricia said, maybe it's almost in our DNA, and the other reason that black men run from racist police. What is it? This is a history of mistreatment of African Americans by law enforcement. Mark Frazier said, I love doing the research and discovery behind it. Okay. All right. How's everybody doing? Okay, if you have a question or comment, give us a call, 914-338-1375. We'll go to the phone lines just a second here. 914-338-1375 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. Let me post this here. 914-338-1375. It's a call-in number if you have a question or comment. Let me see here. All right. So let's see. Let's go to the phone line. Let's go to the phone line. Let's go to the let's see. Let's go to the 267 area code. Call in the 267 area code. Do you have a question or comment, or just listening? Let me see. Hold on. Let me see something. Just a second, caller. Hold on. Let me get you. Hold on. Okay, call in 267 area code. Are you there? Okay, go ahead. Call in 267 area code. Are you there? Okay, let's, I guess they're not paying attention. Okay, maybe they're just listening. All right. Okay, 914-338-1375 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. All right. So this is why the museum in Montgomery, Alabama is so important, because they're documenting this type of history. And a lot of our people don't, well, not just our people, but a lot of Americans don't know this type of history, especially African Americans, but a lot of Americans don't know this type of history. And this ties to the history of slavery, Civil War, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, all the way up to today. Okay, so this type of history is extremely important. All right, before we get out of here, so those in the Detroit area want to remind you that Sunday, May 6th, I'm doing a presentation at Nandy's Knowledge Cafe, 71 Oakman Avenue in Highland Park, Michigan. A Black Panther analysis, African culture, history, and Afrofuturism. We also have that presentation available on DVD at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All my DVD lectures are there, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have the Black Panther Bundle Pack there as well, the 8 DVD Black Panther Bundle Pack also, where you get, it's an 8 DVD bundle pack, you get 5 of my presentations and 3 documentaries, including my 2 presentations dealing with the film Black Panther, okay? We'll post the link here on the thread of the broadcast on Facebook also. All right, so how y'all like this type of information? Be sure to follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. All right, those watching on Facebook. Okay, so in the online course that I teach, the main one, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understand the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach in school. Here are a few of the things that we deal with in the course. What was the transatlantic slave trade? What were some of the events that led to the transatlantic slave trade taking place? What role did Christopher Columbus play? Because Columbus was very crucial to the spread of the transatlantic slave trade. Now, something that's important to understand is that African people were in this land we call the United States of America. We were here before the transatlantic slave trade started. This is what a lot of our people don't understand. Okay. You have a presence from ancient Kemet here, ancient Egypt, but you have the Khoisan, who have the oldest DNA on the planet. They come from Southern Africa, the Khoisan. And they were here going back at least 51,700 years ago. If you read The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence by Dr. David Imhotep, he deals with this in his book. His book has 713 footnotes. Is backed up by 7 peer-reviewed articles. On page 14 of his book, and I've interviewed Dr. David Imhotep about 11 times now. He's a friend of mine. We've done a couple lectures together also. He deals with evidence of an African presence 51,700 years ago in a campsite in Allendale County, South Carolina, discovered by Dr. Albert Goodyear, who's an archaeologist at the University of South Carolina. They found artifacts, architecture, campsites, carvings, Egyptian writings, footprints in lava, genetic M174D haploid groups dealing with DNA and genetics, linguistics, paintings, skulls, skeletons, structures, and tools, okay? And these are some of the slides that we use in the online course. We have book references, articles, PowerPoint presentation, video clips. Okay, so this was before Native Americans came into existence. This is what people don't understand, all right? So this is why, and I have to correct a lot of PhDs on this. So you know, we hear people say we first came to this land, referring to African people, August 20th, 1619, Jamestown, Virginia, right? So even though that did happen, we were here tens of thousands of years before that. This was our land stolen from us, okay? So we deal with a chronology of history in the online course. We don't deal with 500 years of history. We deal with at least 50,000 years of history, but we go back even before then. Okay, so the people who we call Native Americans are the offspring of an intermixing of Africans who were here going back tens of thousands of years, and Asians who come here around 3000 BC. The Africans and Asians intermix in the offspring of who we call Native Americans. Because when you look at old black and white photographs of Native Americans, these were usually a dark-skinned people, okay? And this book right here, you know, what's this? Chronology of Native Americans, okay? The ultimate guide of North America's indigenous people. When you look at old black and white photographs, these were not a light-skinned, almost white-looking people, okay? There was a reason why they had that complexion. Then the other thing is you're going to have groups of when European settlers come to this land. A lot of the you have some African groups or some indigenous Africans, they're going to be killed, you know, in battles with Native Americans. They're going to be killed. They're going to die off. But you have others who get reclassified as Native Americans. So if you don't know that history, you don't know what you're looking for. Okay, because some of them get reclassified as Native Americans also, okay? So we do a lot of different archaeological discoveries that have come out over the few years that are causing scientists to rethink everything. Like this one right here. This deals with the lost city of Egypt called Tanis Heraklion, which was swallowed into the sea about 1,200 years ago. It was built about 8th century BC. It was swallowed into the sea. These are some of the artifacts that they found in the discovery of this lost city of Egypt, Tanis Heraklion. Okay. But when we look at Columbus, it's important. So to understand Columbus setting sail August 3rd, 1492, you have to understand the Moors and the Moors' 800-year occupation of Europe. So we deal with all this in the online course. And the Moors take the teachings from ancient Kemet into Europe. Okay, and Europe was the dark continent. And these teachings, these watered down versions of teachings are going to come to the U.S. when you have the 13 colonies set up. And we know that 50 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons. And they're taking the teachings from ancient Egypt into Europe. And this is how you get the Tekken, because the Tekken is an ancient African symbol of resurrection coming out of ancient Kemet from the story of Asar, Aset, and Heru, who the Greeks called Osiris, Isis, and Horus. And the Washington Monument is a Tekken. George Washington was a Freemason. 50 of the 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons. 13 of the 39 signers of the U.S. Constitution, 1787, were Freemasons. Okay, and the layout of Washington, D.C. is based upon ancient African principles. Okay, so we deal with thousands of years of history. We do all this stuff in the class and deal with things chronologically. Okay, so and then if you look at how much time we have here, because this time's out after 2 hours. Who are we? Okay, and when we look at the word, when we look at Freemasonry, the word Mason is derived from the Latin words mass and sun. Mason means child of light and expresses the desire to pursue light, which is a metaphor for the sun, which symbolizes knowledge. The term child of light, or sons and daughters of light, was first used to identify students who had completed 42 years of study in the temples of ancient Kemet or ancient Egypt. Many Masonic temples were modeled after the temples of Kemet, places where light or knowledge was imparted in a series of steps or degrees. This is where it comes from in college, where you get your credentials in a series of steps or degrees, because the liberal arts were taught in the lodges in ancient Kemet. Okay, so we deal with Christopher Columbus, we deal with the Moors, we deal with what the Moors took into Europe, how the Moors saved Europe, brings Europe out of the Dark Ages, all of that stuff. Okay, we deal with when did the first Africans come to the U.S.? Did Africans sell themselves into slavery? Were African people in America before the slave trade? Yes, we were. 800-year occupation of Europe by the Africans known as the Moors. Shocking archaeological discoveries that are causing experts to rethink everything. The role insurance companies played, because insurance companies did not just take out insurance policies on slaves on the ships, but also on the slave plantations as well. Okay. It took out insurance policies on slaves on the plantations also. All right. We deal with the fake Willie Lynch speech of 1712. Willie Lynch never historically existed. There are words in the speech that didn't even exist in the early 18th century, or their meanings were different at that point in time. We deal with Freemasonry, America and the Founding Fathers, origins of the term America and Africa. The problem with slave movies and the bombardment of slave movies, slave-themed TV shows. The link to ancient Kemet, Egypt, and early Christianity. That's extremely important, okay? So those are just some of the things that we deal with in the online class. All right, that's ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'af, understanding the transatlantic slave trade. And then we have a bundle package, like 10 courses I bundled together. They're all on demand, so you can watch at your own pace, watch from around the world, smartphone, tablet, computer, on sale $60 right now. It's regularly like $130. We just posted a link here on the thread of the broadcast on Facebook. It's also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, all right? Okay, you can go ahead and post more questions if you have them here on the thread, and I'll answer them offline on Facebook. Thanks for tuning in. Hey, remember at the African History Network, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. Right knowledge corrects wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. Those in Detroit will see you Sunday, May 6th at Nandy's Knowledge Cafe, 71 Oakman Avenue, 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have audio podcasts of all these broadcasts, most of them at AfricanHistoryNetwork.com as well. All of my DVD lectures are there. You can read the articles that I write also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right. Talk to you next time. Peace.